A few years ago, I read a book that I don't remember the book. I don't remember the context. What I remember is the author talking about how over and over again in science fiction, whether it's in books or in movies, we have this scene where aliens come and they do terrible things. And what the author was speaking to was that this assumption that a species that is more intelligent and more advanced than our own would use that intelligence and use that power to hurt us is really a statement about us and our own ability to imagine what it's like to be more. He said it's really very revealing. That when we imagine being smarter and having more power, that for many of us, it's difficult to imagine that that isn't somehow just used for our benefit. Maybe even in a cruel way. I think about this a lot. I think it speaks to something important in how, at the end of the day, the way that we understand other people is a reflection of how we understand ourselves. What we think other people might be capable of is a statement on what we think we might be capable of. And that when we start to notice this, we realize we're kind of looking at ourselves all the time. I work as a therapist, and as part of that, sometimes I work as a couples therapist. And you're dealing with conflict and hurt feelings. People disagree all the time, whether it's in a marriage or an office or a sangha or a family. People disagree all the time, and it's really not a big deal. Disagreeing doesn't matter very much. But sometimes disagreeing tips over into something that feels personal. It feels like hurt. And what I find, especially in couples therapy, is that the hurt, more often than not, is about not receiving the benefit of the doubt. It's the pain of being seen in a particular way. Right? I forgot our anniversary. That's a stupid mistake. That probably shouldn't happen. But it becomes an understanding that part of what hurt you about that was that you're seeing me as someone who doesn't care. You see me as someone who is not treating the relationship with care. And I can't stand to be seen in that way. That's too much. I can apologize for forgetting. We can work past forgetting. But the look in your eyes when I know that you think less of me for forgetting, that becomes something that sometimes becomes years of struggle. There's a thing that really popped up, I think, in the last year. I don't know the origin, but clients would come in and they would want to talk to me about the MGI, which is the most generous interpretation. So when you're in a conflict, when you're watching someone behave badly, you ask yourself, what is the most generous interpretation of this? And I smiled the first time I heard it because I think some of us have just discovered this on our own. We didn't think to give it an acronym. We didn't think to trademark it and make money off of it. We just had this idea. And I've mentioned, I think, that for years, and now I'm teaching this to my son because I'm teaching my son to drive. When someone cuts me off in traffic, when they do something that feels so inappropriate while they're driving, I always tell myself, maybe they are carrying a thermos with a human heart. And they are trying to get to the hospital right now. What they're doing is so important that it has made them distracted. I think if I were them, I would cut me off too. And in that moment, I don't follow the story all the way to completion. I don't say that is what's happening. But I kind of offer it up. Because I don't know. It isn't Buddhism exactly, but there's an offering in it that has that quality of practice because we can just reach down and pull it up anytime. We can offer it anytime. Whenever there's some question about another person's intentions, whenever there's that little doubt of, I don't know why they did that, and the why matters, I can ask myself, is it possible that they were coming from a good place? And generally, the answer will be, yeah, it's possible. And then what if I were to relate to them if that were true, as if that were true? Does that feel better than relating to them as if it's not? And again, generally, yes. So even though it's this kind of cute thing that popped up as a meme or something, there's some wisdom here. It's good. But it gets me thinking about how this tradition really holds this question about how we see other people. And then by extension, how we see ourselves. And I think it really comes down to two things. There are two ways we can hold this question. And the first is a really foundational view. What do we know about human existence? We know that it is marked by the three seals. So in that framework, in that view, when I look at anyone, whether I understand their actions or not, whether I understand their intentions or not, I understand, first of all, that they are a person whose life is characterized by dukkha, by a fundamental dissatisfaction about how things are in every single moment. But I only see that if I see it in myself. It wouldn't occur to me or to anyone to read about dukkha, not relate to it, and then say, that's how everybody is, except me. First and foremost, it's a teaching about me. I have to ask myself, is this true? And I have to do the thought experiment, and I have to see moment to moment to moment. Is there a kind of itch that I feel even in the best of times? And when I recognize that I do, and I see this teaching as it's presented, I'm able to say, oh, this explains a lot. Not just in me, but in literally every person I've ever met, in every encounter I've ever had. This is part of what's going on. So when someone does something or says something that I don't agree with, I can start with, that person is like me. That person is struggling with reality in the way that I'm struggling with reality. And I can go to the second seal of impermanence and I can recognize this is a person who was not always exactly this person and who will not always be exactly this person. This is a person who was born and who is dying and who is surrounded by birth and death just like me. Even if I despise this person, I have to, if I'm paying attention to this, if I really apply this to myself and I notice who I am, I have to make space for the reality, for the fact that this person I despise will not always be this person. And so I cannot write them off. I can't. Any more than I can write myself off. And then the third seal is about interdependence and the understanding that this person in front of me who is driving me crazy does not exist in a vacuum. They have been influenced by so many things. They have had so many experiences that brought them to this moment. And this moment is an experience that's bringing them to the next moment. And I am influencing them, and they are influencing me, and we are not separate. Not only can I understand that aspect of their experience, even if I don't know the particulars, even if they don't really understand the particulars, which most of us don't, not only are we the same in that way, but we're shaping each other just by being in the room. And so, whatever impulse I have to say, oh no, you're over there, is just false. And these appear as these foundational teachings, A, because they're true, but B, because they're the ones that we need to have on the wall and we need to remind ourselves of all the time. We forget and we forget, we forget. We forget who we are and then we forget who other people are. And we fall into conflict and we fall into misunderstanding. We fall into a feeling of separation. Because we're ignoring certain basic universal truths about what it is to be a human being. So part of the ask of this tradition is for us to look at ourselves and to look at these teachings and then apply them universally. And then we can ask ourselves, what does that change? In my own life, I would say it changes everything. Everything. So there's that. there's this really vulnerable reality that I suffer and I change and I'm not totally in control. And there's nothing I can do to change that. But I can open up to the fact that you also suffer and you also change and you also are not completely in control. And I can meet you there. And when you disappoint me, I have a way to make some sense of that. Not all of it, but enough maybe that I don't feel the need to write you off. I don't feel the need to label you as this kind of person because you'll always be that kind of person because you were always that kind of person. I'm able to sink into the fact that what we have in common is really much bigger and more profound than these subtle things that make us different. And I've used this example before, but I think of it again all the time. If you had just been told by your doctor that you're dying, that you're actively dying, and you were holding that as an inescapable truth, and then you went to a party and you found yourself sitting next to someone who opened up and said, I just went to the doctor and I was just told that I'm dying. The connection you would feel with that person would be so profound. You would look around at everyone else in the room and you would think, no one else knows what we know. We see something that other people don't see. This is what we're holding. What these foundational teachings do is they say, that's how it always is. If you can be awake to that, if you can be aware of that, then every person you meet is that person at the party. Whether they know or not, you know. It starts with knowing you. Then it's just a matter of noticing. That's the first part. There's a second part to this that is part of Buddhism's history and evolution, which is the idea of the bodhisattva. When we say, beings are countless, I vow to free them all, we're saying so much. We're saying, I have a responsibility to all beings. I accept that responsibility to all beings. And because I accept it, I'm agreeing to the possibility that I am capable of it. That I am capable of holding the whole world. That I am capable of taking responsibility for everything. Everything. This is a huge vision of what it is to be alive. such a huge part of this practice in this tradition and in the other traditions that take on this idea of the bodhisattva is simply, can I see myself that way? Am I capable of seeing myself as a bodhisattva? Am I saying it because everybody's saying it and it would be awkward if I didn't say it? Maybe, sometimes, maybe at the beginning. When I say delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to put an end to them. All of them. At some point, am I saying that as someone who is truly agreeing to it? Can I see myself in that way, in that vast, immeasurable way, as someone who is capable of holding everything? This, I think, is a little harder. The first part, the three seals, feel a little bit like science, right? There's a hypothesis and we test it, and we can figure out pretty quickly, yep, dukkha, true impermanence, true interdependence, yep, I can't seem to find an exception. But this one involves digging deep in a different way. Can I agree to what this tradition is asking of me in a sincere way? Not in a delusional way, not in a inflated way, not in a heroic way. But in a more straightforward way of when you go to work and you sit at your desk and you understand that this job is your job. It's not someone else's. It's yours. It's really yours. Can you believe that? Because if you can believe it, if you can see yourself that way, then you can see others in that way. In this community, of course, because we all actually say it out loud. We stand up and we agree to this together and we renew this together. So we can look across the room and we can look at the screen and we can say, yes, that person, I see that person as a bodhisattva because that person is taking this up with me. They're walking this same path. And we can admire that and be grateful for that. We can trust eventually that whatever capacity I feel is a capacity that they have. And if we can do that, then we can do it everywhere. Because the only difference between a bodhisattva here and a bodhisattva out on the street is that we've named it and we call it this and we chant about it. We've agreed to it. But it isn't as if, and I say this when we do precept ceremonies, it isn't as if you're taking on a responsibility that was optional. It never was. It's just that now you're recognizing it and you're owning it. The person standing across from you at the gas station holds the same responsibility you do. And if they hold that, whether they know it or not, they must be capable of it in the same way that you are capable of it. And so that person who is pumping gas, if you pause for a moment, if you think about who you are for a moment, and then you look at them, you understand this is a person who is capable of holding the world, This is a person who is capable of freeing all beings. Why? Because I am. And why would we be different? When we see that clearly, what a gift. That person at the gas station, that person on the street, even the person in the Sangha may not know how they are being seen. But when we say, we have this phrase now, people say, oh, I feel so seen. Even when someone says, I feel seen, they don't mean seen in this way. Because most people can't imagine being seen in this way. They can't imagine that you are looking at them as someone who can hold responsibility for all beings. The trust. Most people will never feel it and they will never know. Most people can't comprehend. That anyone could look at them with those eyes. But you can. And you have a responsibility to, because you have a responsibility to fulfill the vows. And to fulfill the vows, you have to believe that you can. And to believe that you can is to believe that they can. And so we might disagree sometimes. We might not understand each other's point of view. We might feel confused by what a person says or does. But we don't have to be confused by who they are. Because the extent to which we can understand who they are is how we understand who we are. And what we know about ourselves is remarkable. It's more than we think we know. And that's where I'll stop.